what is Congressman Rogers' thoughts on what the president said last night?
Well, it was very political. The fact is, this has all been about the next presidential election for the president. He has not put a plan on the table. Speaker Boehner and Leader Reid have been over there for the last couple of weeks trying to deal with him. He is not willing to cut any spending unless he gets new taxes. And, the fact is, as Speaker Boehner has said, even if he wanted to let him have new taxes, he can't get that through the House. So it's about reducing spending. And what our position has been is if you'll agree to reduce spending, we'll agree to raise the debt ceiling up to 95% of whatever you'll cut. So, for example, if you'll cut $1.2 trillion, we'll raise the debt ceiling $1 trillion, which is what's on the table now. And President Obama has said, no, with no new tax revenue, I'm not going to do it. But he won't put his own plan on the table, which has been just terribly frustrating because how can you negotiate with somebody who doesn't offer an option? The House passed the cut, cap, and balance bill last week, which the president said he would veto before we even passed it, and the Senate wouldn't take it up. So now we've come up with a second option, which is much smaller, much more modest. It does raise the debt ceiling $1 trillion and calls for $1.2 billion in taxes and a joint council from the House and Senate to work on a longer-term resolution over the next 6 months. And we'd have to be back by February and extend it again with some longer-term spending cut. But this is all about posturing for the next election. That's why the president has been working so hard to make it seem like he's the grown-up in the room, and these evil Republicans in the House just won't deal with it. That would have more credibility, in my view, if he had put out his proposal and said, here's what I think will fix it. But he hasn't. The Senate hasn't put anything out.
Now, here's the problem with that, and this is what a lot of conservatives are really fired up about, because the Republicans keep putting out plans. This is going back to Paul Ryan's budget proposal a while back, because the Democrats didn't pass a budget for a couple of years. The Senate didn't pass a budget for, I think it's going on almost 900 days now. Now, the problem is that Republicans keep putting out plans, and they keep countering and basically debating and competing with themselves. Now, do you see that as a problem, or do you see that as being a positive thing, because there's kind of a buffet of the choices out there, although none are really being rising to the top?
Listen, there is nothing good about this plan that we're going to vote on tomorrow, other than the fact it kicks the can down the road a little bit. But what the Republicans in the House are trying to do is to show we're trying to lead. We are offering ideas and solutions and trying to lead, and the president's not, the Democrat Party is not, because you haven't seen any plans but ours. And you're right, we're negotiating against ourselves, but the fact is we're the minority party, and the president has the big microphone, which he used last night. And right now, unfortunately, most of America thinks he's the grown-up in the room and trying to be compromising, and they don't recognize that we're the ones that are putting deals on the table. That's not fair, but it's the way it is. So we keep working at it, and our goal is twofold. One is to make sure we get a solution to this that helps bring spending down, but also helps demonstrate to Americans, particularly independents, that if you put us in charge next November, you'll get answers to our problem.
Now, you mentioned Speaker Boehner's debt deal, and this seems to be the closest thing that, other than cut, cap, and balance, that's going to come up for a vote. But the problem is that
tomorrow.
You receive strong opposition. Right. You mentioned that apparently you don't like it, and a lot of people don't like it. Conservatives as a whole don't like it. Congressman Jim Jordan, chairman of what's becoming a very powerful Republican Study Committee, House Caucus, he has stated, and I'm quoting now, there are 218 Republicans in support of it. There are not 218 Republicans in support of this plan. So you personally, there's no way that you would vote tomorrow for Speaker Boehner's deal as it currently stands.
No, I'm a member of the RSC, the Jim Jordan chairs, but I am voting yes tomorrow because we have to put solutions on the table and force the Senate and the President to deal with this. The fact is, if we can get those 217 votes, and it's 217 this time because there's like 3 vacancies in the House, if we can get to 217, the Senate will have no option to take this up. I mean, next Tuesday is a serious date that has dramatic implications for all Americans. we think the Senate will have to take it up, and the President will have to sign it. One thing I would point out to your listeners that's different about this than cut, cap, and balance, the President came out and publicly said before we pass cut, cap, and balance, if the House passes it, I will veto it. Last night when he made his appeal to the nation, he never said that because he knows he'll have to sign it. And what we are telling our members is none of us like this. This is not the way we want to do business. But we're not running this town. We are in the minority. We're trying to make the best of a terrible situation. And if we do this, we have put a solution on the table. The Senate will have to pass. The President will have to sign. And the fact is, we want people to remember this. 10 months ago, 9 months ago, they could pass anything they wanted without anybody slowing it down. At least now we've made them stop. They can't do stuff without dealing with us and dealing with the realities the American people recognize, which is we're spending more money than we've got.
So is the position right now for Republicans, any deal is better than no deal?
No. Any deal that cuts spending more than we raise the debt ceiling is acceptable right now.
So dollar for dollar is not something that's acceptable?
No, it's got to be more cut than the debt ceiling increase. Our position is we will raise the debt ceiling 95% of whatever he'll agree to cut. And the other thing I want your listeners to know that's good about this, and this is very sad, but it's the only good thing about this situation, is the President keeps saying, and the Treasury Secretary says, I want this to go past next election. That's because he doesn't want to talk about how bad his fiscal priorities have been before next November. The bill that's on the table tomorrow, if we pass it, only gets us to February. That's why President, and this deal Harry Reid helped craft, Friday and Saturday. Sunday, when the President found out that Harry Reid had cut a deal, he called him and cussed him out and said, you can't do this to me, make me have to deal with it in an election year. I frankly want the American people to have this conversation again in February when we're looking at who we're going to elect for our next president, to be reminded that this man is spending more money than we can pay and doesn't care.
Well, I agree to that point, not so much because Obama's in power, and in the presidency, obviously, but I think government spending should always be a topic for debate. I think people should stop, and they did for a long time. They buried their head in the sand, and, everybody enjoyed the fruits of everybody else's labor, and that became a problem. And, it wasn't just Bush. It started a while back, but it really hit it, Obama really just started taking the car over the cliff, and that's not speaking as a partisan. He set records with his spending, and that's historic over the course of history. Now,
yeah, O'Reilly has made the best point on his TV program, Bill O'Reilly, and that is that we now are spending $4 billion a day more than we're bringing in. That's how much debt we're incurring every day. Under George Bush, it was $1.6 billion. Under Clinton, it was $500 million. This is not sustainable. This is not an option. We have to stop spending more than we're bringing in.
Well, that's the key here, and hopefully the Republicans are able to, once it passes the House tomorrow, should it pass the House, once you get to the Senate, we do have a lot of good conservative members in there. Senator Jim DeMint, who was on my show last week, working on getting Senator Mike Lee. Senator Rand Paul's out there, and he actually has what's called the penny plan, and he's working with Connie Mack on that. I want to get your thoughts on that, but I want to keep talking about the debt ceiling discussions because even Obama was removed from it over the weekend after talks broke down on Saturday. But politicians are elected by the people and granted employment to represent the people. It doesn't matter if it's local, state, national, it doesn't matter what kind of seat it is. But let's face it, these debt discussions have been as transparent as mud. What are your feelings towards the lack of open dialogue and transparency from leadership on both sides of the aisle during what's supposed to be this really important series of talks?
It has been disappointing, and I acknowledge it's on both sides of the aisle, both chambers, but especially from the White House. We've got to have more transparency about what we're talking about because it does affect everybody so directly. But the bottom line is now, and you mentioned the plans that Senator DeMint has and others have, those have no chance of getting called up. I hate it because I like their plans, but the only plan that has a chance of passing is the one that John Boehner and Harry Reid crafted over the weekend after the talks with the White House broke down because Obama would not come off not having new revenues. And Boehner was honest with him, said, listen, even if I wanted to do it, I couldn't pass it out of the House. Y'all got to recognize I got the practical reality getting 217 votes. If there's new taxes, it's not going to happen. So that's why he left the talks with the president and said, listen, we're a separate branch of government. I'm going to deal with the Democrat-controlled Senate. We're going to come up with a solution. You can sign it if you want to or not sign it if you want to. And they came in with a deal.
I don't think Speaker Boehner, you mentioned that Speaker Boehner was against raising revenues for the government. He was against raising taxes as the only means of raising revenue.
Correct.
Because, life economics has to take over sooner or later. And that's what he's trying to put into the discussion.
And that's where the $800 billion that he agreed to and raise revenue would come from growth. But all tax rates had to be reduced to do that. Now, he was willing to close some loopholes, and all of us are. I mean, the fact is, me and you and your listeners, we all have to pay our percentage, so nobody gives us any loopholes. So we don't have a problem with closing loopholes on people who aren't paying their fair share, but we're not going to raise tax rates on anybody, particularly in this economy.
Right. Well, that's interesting to bring that into discussion is closing tax loopholes, tax law loopholes, because actually Reagan pursued that same avenue and they were able to raise a lot of money that way, and it didn't hurt the economy, which is, of course, paramount.
Right.
Do you think that President Obama has politicized the executive branch and weakened the position in the court of public opinion because his base is crumbling around him? We saw the same thing with President Clinton, although the Republicans did save him with their reforms and made him look like a genius towards the end of his presidency. But Obama's losing a lot of people very quickly, and he rode a tremendous, tremendous election in 2008, and all political junkies have to give him and his campaign and the Democrats credit for the way that they ran their campaigns. Dirty or not, they swept into everything, had a supermajority, and now everything's crumbling around them. Do you feel that he's politicized his position, and do you think he's weakened the position itself? Obviously, it's the most powerful in the world, but is it now less than it was before he came into power?
It is. It's awful how much it's been politicized, and it's not just his office in the White House. I serve on two committees in the House. I'm on the Armed Services Committee, and I'm on the Homeland Security Committee. It is incredible how much those departments have been politicized. We had a readiness subcommittee hearing today in the Armed Services Committee, and we had the vice chiefs of all the services in there, and every one of them said the cuts the president is talking about making to defense to pay for his social programs would devastate our military. Our military has been worn out over the last 10 years. We have stopped building new ships, new airplanes, new submarines, all the things we have to replenish our retiring fleet. But that's still not enough. They want to gut it even further because they don't believe that we ought to be a superpower. Homeland Security, I'm very involved in that committee. I'm one of the most senior members of that committee, and there is nothing that comes into Secretary Napolitano's office that's not political in her eyes. So, it's not just him, but the people he put around him, and you can go through Secretary of Health and Education and Welfare, Education, whatever. Everything has been politicized in this town right now, and I think that's going to come back to roost on him.
Well, hopefully it does, and again, not speaking as a partisan, but I don't want to see stuff like education, which has been, and anytime the government gets involved in any kind of social program or any kind of fiscal policy or anything like that, it's always politicized and usually never ends well, and the military is the only thing that's ever really been successful in, CIA and FBI. But even there's been a lot of breakdown, and there's been a lot of confusion, there's been a lot of politicizing, and I've heard from people that have been involved, people that know people that are currently involved. So I got a lot of inside knowledge to that, indirectly. But, that's a real problem because this matters when I go travel, when you travel, go back home to your districts, to your family, when you go back to D.C. It's a major problem because none of us want to be involved in any kind of terrorist act. We've seen the damage that it's done.
And it's a very dangerous world. I'm chairman of the Transportation Security Committee, which obviously oversees TSA and all of our air travel, but also trucking, rail, pipelines, all transportation. And the threat is very real, and I can't overstate that for your listeners. But, the fact is, if in fact I think the American people do next November what they started last November, and that is cleaning house,